Thirdly, this is our last meeting before our Christmas party, believe it or not. Next month is our holiday party on December 2nd. We have not firmed up our plans for the parties yet, so if you have suggestions for fun activities, please let us know. We want to make a fun party. And lastly, starting in January, we'll be doing some programming on voter education in preparation for the March 17th. Yes, St. Patrick's Day that the primaries happens. One of the important things to take away when voting this year is reviewing the judgeships. If you are mindful, like me, you can see that the judiciary is what's standing between normalcy and chaos in our political happenings today. So it's important to review where the judges stand so you can make an informed choice. And we will show you how to go about doing just that. Our topic today is Native American foods. We're going to start, before we start on the Native American foods, if you were here for our meeting September, we have a little follow-up. It's very relevant to that topic, which we're going to do first before the Native American foods.
But you've got some very strong passages about building houses and not in my backyard. When I read your passages on housing, I get a little bit defensive. I have a very nice house in the Berkeley Hills. You used to live in a very nice neighborhood in Bernal Heights, I guess. But you make a very good case that homeowners like me bear some responsibility for the housing and homeless crisis.
Well,
now I would say...
welcome to the struggle session.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you to help me struggle with this. I am, they're proposing a 6-unit, 4-story thing right next to me. I know it'll please the crowd, but it's going to cut into my property values. It's going to, it's going to shade my garden. I won't be able to garden anymore. Help me, convince me that I should not sue or complain.
It's your turn.
And I have a good lawyer.
Noted. The trade-off exists. There's a plant that's going to lose sun, and there's 6 families that are going to get a house. There's a part of me that doesn't even want to elaborate beyond that calculation. So I'll only elaborate briefly. I think Ezra put it best. There's no such thing as change without trade-offs. But there's also no such thing as stasis without trade-offs. The world in which that house is never built, the world in which every slant of shade over every plant is moral justification for an infinitude of legal challenges, is a world in which no housing will be built. Because there is not a single home not a single piece of urban multifamily housing construction that isn't going to change the neighborhood somewhat. Even I remember when I was doing research for coming to California, because I didn't live here and wanted to have some California stories for the tour. And I saw that, I think it was the month after the single-family zoning law was passed in 2021, there was an apartment building for 500 units in San Francisco that was denied by the Board of Representatives. 100 of those units would have been below market rent. It was going to be built on a Nordstrom valet parking lot, and it was rejected by the board. A part of me is just purely angry about that. And not just because I have no love lost for Nordstrom or valet parking, but also because it seems so unbelievably obvious that that Nordstrom valet parking lot is doing very, very little for the city of San Francisco. And 500 families being able to live in downtown San Francisco is doing quite a bit for the city. But even there, as a matter of persuasion, I recognize that maybe something is being lost for some people. At a certain level of persuasion, maybe it does no good to pretend that there is no cost to adding new housing. Mm-hmm. There is a cost to everything. But it is, I think, just undeniable to me that in the final calculus, we want to build cities for people.
I want to pick this up just real quick. And the thing I want to say to Michael Pollan, the constructed character we have here, is I actually don't want to persuade you of this. It is your God-given right to not want an apartment building down the block. It just should not be your legal given right to stop it. Mm-hmm. The reason they can build apartments in Houston and Austin, but not San Francisco and Berkeley, is not because we got rid of selfishness in Texas. We just didn't. We just don't give people there the tools to stop it. And these defaults people are perfectly happy with. People are leaving here and moving there. Right? They're not furious. They're not upset. They're not, you can, and it's not that you don't have democracy anymore if you can't block every housing development. You do. You have mayors and you have governors and you have state senators, and they're supposed to write rules that work. Look, it took this state decades of working on it to make it so you could finally build an ADU on land you already own. And it wasn't the first bill they passed that made it possible. The first bill they passed, it turned out that they had all these loopholes, and the cities fought it. And they fought it, and they passed another bill, and they fought it, and it took like 10, 15 years. And now, ADU growth is explosive. 1 out of every 5 homes built in the state is an ADU. But I think the moral of the story is that for all the fighting, for all the 15 or 20 years of battle that took, is anybody mad now? Does anybody run around and be like, this was a great state before the ADUs? Yeah. I was in an ADU today. It was lovely, a lot of natural light. I think that we have sometimes made this into too much a question of persuasion. It's not that everybody should support God bless the YIMBYs, but this is not always a war for hearts and minds. And as anybody who's been involved in YIMBY organizing knows, you're not gonna win a bunch of the hearts and minds. It's a war for the policy default.
Yeah.
It's a war for, on basis, can you build within certain parameters or not? Because you should be able to complain about the things that are changing around you. You should. That's free speech. That's being a human being. You just shouldn't be able to control it.
Yeah, so complain, don't sue.
Yeah, no, don't be allowed to, right?
Don't be able to sue. Okay, thank you.
Well, I thought it was interesting that the middle guy said it's your right to disagree, the right to disagree.
I think there was a touch of sarcasm in that.
Well, it is your God-given right.
Yeah.
Whether we're allowed is another thing.
To change it,
No,
Power.
Yeah, that's how.
we have an opinion.
Like a cane bill.
And actually, our government, which allows you to have an opinion and express an opinion, is a step forward in freedoms that some other countries don't have.
And some
It's a
people
big
in our
plus.
don't want to stay.
But there is still a movement to sequester opinion or sequester.
But having the opinion doesn't mean that they have to do what is in what you think is your best interest.
You get enough people up in arms, maybe you can change.
There you go. Public opinion en masse is
And
a
that's what
different.
AARP and Jane Addams Caucus and Northside, Chicago, or North, or whatever that, all these community organizations. And we've seen their effectiveness, I think, in the first No King's March, where there were 5 million people. The second one, 7 million people.
And good people.
And there's a third one coming.
I don't think Trump saw it.
I will say in this, I walk through that neighborhood all the time, and I see all the anti-upzoning signs. What I don't, and I'm glad you represented another point of view. What you don't hear from in this democratic conversation is the people who would benefit from the affordable housing that too many talk about in all those units.
Right.
That's what,
It's not even mentioned there. I mean, you don't have those people. I'm not criticizing you, it's just.
no, I'm saying that was the opinion of this guy on the right.
Yeah, yeah.
So wrote the
So
book.
somebody has to represent that, and Dr. Martin Luther King came here in the 60s advocating fair housing. It was on racial lines. This is socioeconomic.
Right.
Where this is coming from. But it's, you know, if you leave Martin Luther King, like look at what he had to say when he came to Chicago, with very similar issues.
And there are still people saying, oh, you wouldn't want to rent here, this is all around.
Well, we just keep moving along though, don't we?
Little by little.
We hope to. I want to continue.
I live in an integrated building and I love
I had one last comment to make about the whole thing. That neighborhood is one of the few neighborhoods in the city of Chicago that was not redlined in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it worked out just fine. So this is a different version of trying to like we're better off not doing that. You know?
And everybody knows that the city council passed the upzoning, so it is going to be upzoned. Yeah, well, just because they passed it doesn't mean it's the end of the battle either, okay? We still have a voice, and that's where our older people are very important, and to talk to the people in your ward. We have to keep fighting the battle.
Okay, well, sorry, I didn't see you, Sue.
Yes, I should have brought the book with me, Abundance.
About housing.
No, it's about, no, it's about abundance. That very quickly, the book challenges the basic premise of capitalism, which talks about scarcity. Capitalism doesn't work unless there's scarcity around, okay? That's a whole nother issue.
Yes. Well, let's learn something now for something completely different. Native American foods. Some of them you know, very familiar with, everyday items. Some of them you may have never heard of.
Corn.
No, we're not going corn route. These are other things.
Okay.
Jerusalem artichoke. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but
Well, today's your lucky day. You're going to find out about it. It's neither from Jerusalem or an artichoke. No. Another name for it is root sunchoke or Canadian truffle. It's a species of sunflower native to Central North America. Jerusalem artichokes were first cultivated by the indigenous peoples of the Americas, though the exact native range of the species is unknown. Sorry. Genome analysis has ruled out the common sunflower, also originating in the Americas, as an ancestor, and instead points to hybridization between the hairy sunflower and sawtooth sunflower. It is cultivated widely across the temperate zone for its tuber, which is what you see on the right there, which is used as a root vegetable. The flowers are briefly fragrant, giving off a light vanilla chocolate perfume. The tubers can be eaten raw, cooked, or pickled. Before the arrival of Europeans, indigenous peoples cultivated them as a food source. The tubers persist for years after being planted. So the species expanded its range from Central North America to the eastern and western regions. The tuber contains about 2% protein, no oil, and little starch. It is rich in the carbohydrate insulin. Tubers stored for any length of time convert their insulin into its components, fructose. Jerusalem artichokes have an underlying sweet taste because of the fructose, which is about 1.5 times as sweet as sucrose. It has also been reported as a folk remedy for diabetes. Since insulin is not assimilated in the intestine, it does not cause a glycemic spike as potatoes would. Temperature variances have been shown to affect the amount of insulin the Jerusalem artichoke can produce. It makes less insulin in a cooler region than when it is in a warmer region.
The yellow flower and that tuber are the same thing?
Yes, yeah, that's the, would see it if you're walking. This is called a ground nut. On the left, you see it, it grows as a vine up tree trunks and whatever. That's a closer look where you can see some of the foliage. And this, once again, is, well, let me tell you about it. A deciduous or evergreen perennial vine that bears edible beans and large edible tubers. The tubers have traditionally been a staple food among most indigenous people of the Americas within the natural range of the plant. The roots resemble potatoes and were boiled by the Indians who ate them instead of bread. Many tribes peel them and dry them in the sun, such as the Menominee, who have traditionally built scaffolds of cedar bark covered with mats to dry their tubers for winter use. The Menominee are recorded as having dried the tubers in maple syrup or making a preserve of groundnut tubers by boiling them in maple syrup. The Potawatomi have traditionally boiled their tubers. Chippewa have historically used them as a sort of seasoning in all their foods. So that's pretty interesting. If I had another picture, but I couldn't fit it in this thing. You see in this middle picture here where there the little round balls and then the vines. It if they stretched it out, it would look like a necklace with beads. So they don't grow close together, they grow far apart. The next one, the next slide. You who are Chicagoans will like this one. Wild lakes, also called ramps, known as Indian garlic. It is a bulbous perennial flowering plant in the Amaryllis family. It is North American species of wild onion or garlic found in eastern North America. It was gathered in the woodlands to the south of Lake Michigan. The city of Chicago received its name from a dense growth of ramps near Lake Michigan in Illinois country observed in the 17th century. The Chicago River was referred to by the plant's indigenous name, according to explorer Robert Cavalier, the naturalist and diarist Henry Joutel. The plant called now this is, I never heard it said, so it's my interpretation of it. Chicagua, in the Miami, Illinois language spoken by the local indigenous people, was once thought to be alum, the nodding wild onion, but research in the early 1990s showed the correct plant was the ramp. And you can see this picture over here on the right, not very well, but could you move the Zoom people a little? You've probably seen these in the grocery store and didn't recognize what they were. This is an indigenous plant called the ramp.
Green onion, but different.
Yes, it looks like a big rounded bottom green onion. It probably tastes like it too. Okay, our next one is ostrich fern or fiddlehead fern coils.
Oh.
Now, on the left, you see the plant growing. The green sterile fronds develop in autumn, persist erect over the winter, and release the spores in early spring. The fronds are broad, long tapering to the base, but short tapering to the tip, so that they resemble ostrich plumes, hence the name. They do look like plumes. The tightly wound immature fronds, which you see over here on the right, called fiddleheads, are also used as a cooked vegetable and are considered a delicacy mainly in rural areas of northeastern North America. It is considered inadvisable to eat uncooked fiddleheads. Brown scales are inedible and should be scraped or rinsed. The sprouts are also picked all over Japan. And the note is kogomi in Japanese, as well as other Asian regions where they are considered a delicacy. Additionally, in Norway, fiddleheads were apparently used in the manufacture of beer, and in Russia, in the control of gut parasites. Now, if you've been to some gourmet restaurants, you'll see these fiddleheads. You know, they're about this big around, and they usually come fried or roasted, and they taste like asparagus.
So were they indigenous to the Americas and
Yeah.
then moved to Japan and Norway and all these other places?
You know, I think the fern is such an old plant, it's hard to tell. Yeah,
Fern, is that early part, is that like the early shoot of the fern, or does that?
No,
grow
it's-
sometimes?
if the picture were clearer, you can see right here in the middle picture how it's sort of at the end of the, you know, you have the long
Mhm.
ostrich plume and then a little feather round thing at the top.
Was Fran originally a fern?
You never know. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, everybody knows maple syrup, right? And none of us may have done the maple syrup festival in March at the North Park Village Center, where they collect, boil, and sell the maple syrup and give demonstrations. Maple syrup is a sweet syrup made from the sap of maple trees. In cold climates, these trees store starch in their trunks and roots before winter. The starch is then converted to sugar that rises in the sap in late winter and early spring. Maple trees are tapped by drilling holes into their trunks and collecting the sap, which is heated to evaporate much of the water, leaving the concentrated syrup. And it takes about 40 gallons of this sap from the tree to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. So,
But it's worth
oh, is it worth it?
Yeah.
it. Actually, technicality.
If you ever have a chance to go to that demonstration out, it's worthwhile.
We also have a demonstration in Indiana Dunes. And the Indiana Dunes National Park.
Yeah, there's a lot of places because it's so interesting to see the process. Maple syrup was first made by the indigenous people of northeastern North America. The practice was adapted by European settlers. 3 species of maple tree are the main source of maple syrup: the sugar maple, the black maple, and the red maple, because their sap has a high sugar content, 2 to 5%. The Algonquins recognized maple sap as a source of energy and nutrition. At the beginning of the spring thaw, they made V-shaped incisions in tree trunks. They then inserted reeds or concave pieces of bark to run the sap into clay buckets or tightly woven birch bark baskets. The maple syrup was concentrated first by leaving it exposed to the low temperatures overnight and disposing of the layer of ice that formed on the top. Following that, the sap was transported by sled to large fires where it was boiled in clay pots to produce maple syrup. Yum, yum. And wild rice. And my
Oh, yeah.
we have a sample. This was made this morning, and it's nothing but the actual wild rice, water and salt. You may be familiar with wild rice, probably most often combined with other types of rice in salads, soups, and pilafs. Wild rice is any of 4 species of grasses that form the genus Zizania, and the grain that can be harvested from them. The grain was historically and is still gathered and eaten in North America and to the lesser extent China, where the plant stem is used as a vegetable. Wild rice grains have a chewy outer sheath with a tender inner grain that has a slightly vegetable taste. Plants grow in shallow water in small lakes and slow flowing streams. Often, only the flowering head of wild rice rises above the water. The grain is eaten by dabbing ducks and other aquatic wildlife. I don't know if you've ever seen how they harvest it. It's harvested by canoeing into a stand of plants and bending the ripe grain heads with 2 small wooden pole sticks called knockers or flails, so as to thresh the seeds into the canoe. And while somebody's pulling from behind slowly through these reeds, somebody's taking, like you see, one stick and put it over the canoe, another stick, and as the tops of the grains come over the canoe, the grains fall into the canoe, and when they have a canoe full, they go empty it out and keep on going. If you've ever been witness to the gathering of wild rice in upper Midwest areas, you might find, as I have found, the process to be almost religious. It is the working together of 2 people and 3 poles. One person silently pulling the canoe through the tall grass, and the other person using right and left hand poles in rhythm and pulling over the steel seed-bearing heads of the tall grass over the canoe so that the seeds fall into the canoe. It's just a process like that. You see them going through, and it's almost like they're swimming, but they're gathering little bunches of the grass and bending it over into the canoe so that the seeds fall into the canoe. It's a quiet, rhythmic process, like a dance of 2 participants. I've seen it done, and it's really amazing. It's very quiet. I mean, there's no sound, just the little rustle of the grass. Yeah, yeah. People do call, I guess you could call it a grain too, but it's really a grass seed. So I hope you enjoyed that wild rice. This is cooked, yeah. I cooked it this morning. It's surprisingly easy to cook. You get, like, for 1 cup of wild rice, you take 4 cups of water, bring it to a boil. I put it in the oven so it's even heat at 300 degrees in about 40 or 45 minutes. Take it out, it's all cooked, just like you have it here. And it's so good mixed with other things like cranberries and fruits and you know what, make a nice pilaf with it.
Georgia's complaining that she doesn't get it.
I know, Georgia, sorry. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta be here. And the next one you're somewhat familiar with too, mesquite. It's a native to dry areas of the Americas. Mesquites have extremely long tap roots to seek water from very far underground, making them extremely drought tolerant. As they are legumes, mesquites are one of the very few sources of fixed nitrogen in the desert habitat. Their fruit, known as mesquite pods, which is what is in the upper right here, are dried and often sweet, edible for humans and livestock, and served as a staple food for indigenous peoples in the deserts of North America. Once the pod is dry, the whole pod can be ground into flour and made into bread, which you see the flour on the lower left there. Mesquite wood was a popular type of wood used by early Spaniards to build ships, but is now used mostly for high-end rustic furniture and cabinets. Scraps and small pieces are used commonly as wood for cooking with smoke in the United States. You know, you can buy mesquite wood for your barbecue to get the mesquite taste. Red orange sap can be found on the branches of mesquite trees during the summer. This sap was used by those who lived in the desert for several medicinal treatments. The sap was used as a salve and spread on burns and cuts to speed up the healing process. Gargling a mixture of water and sap was used to soothe sore throats, and the same mixture was said to be able to cure upset stomachs.
Huh.
You didn't know those wood chips could do all that for you, right? And our next, the prairie turnip, and it really looks like a turnip, doesn't it? It's a herbaceous perennial plant native to prairies and dry woodlands of central North America, which bears a starchy tuberous root edible as a root vegetable. The prairie turnip continues to be a staple food in the Plains Indians. The prairie turnip has a range on the Great Plains from Manitoba south to Texas and from Wisconsin west to Montana. The relative scarcity of the plant today compared to its previous abundance may be because most prairie has been converted to farmlands or managed grasslands. Abundant under favorable conditions, palatable and nutritious, the prairie turnip was once a wild gathered staple food of the Plains Indians, especially the nomads and of early European explorers. It was harvested May through July when the blooming flower stalks were easily visible among prairie grasses. The prairie turnip is more nutritious than most root crops, containing about 7% protein.
Wow.
More than 50% carbohydrate, and is rich in vitamins and trace minerals. Particularly important was the vitamin C content of 17.1 milligrams per 100 grams, as the winter meat-rich diet of the Plains Indians was often deficient in vitamins. You all know what the hazelnut is, and you think of it as a tree, but it's actually a bush. And the Native American one is a bush. And the seeds come in like a walnut shell. And this is what you see at the grocery store, the hazelnuts that look like that. But they're a Native American plant. And we know how good it is. But so now you know some of the Native American plants that help us survive. And all these are wild growing plants. They're not, I mean, the white rice, of course, is now cultivated because it's so common. But I mean, if you were foraging and you knew what to look for, you could probably still find these plants there out in the forest and along riverbanks and whatnot. But you know, that's not how most people get their food. And Dan has a wonderful video of how the Native Americans are trying to solve that issue, getting more native foods to their tribes and to others.
We are experiencing food insecurity globally, nationally, locally right now. Food is such an integral part of one's culture. No matter what background you come from, what culture you're from around the world, food is such a pillar to that activity. And when we encounter a new climate, especially during climate chaos, where we're shifting, we're moving seasons, the weather patterns are changing, we should reach back to our indigenous, traditional ecological knowledge and approach our farming practices from that lens. There are so many factors that contribute to our food insecurity in our country. Logistically, we have consolidated our seed companies, food distribution companies, and grocery stores. It's just a handful of companies that are producing and distributing foods to Americans. Additionally, land continues to go up in price.
40% of farmers don't own the property they farm nationwide. That's mega farms to little farms. 40% of our food system, the American food system, is on rented land. And that's a really dangerous and scary place to be.
Also, we are fighting climate chaos. High spikes, cold and hot, wet and dry, are coming our way constantly. All of that makes a huge impact on food distribution and access in our community.
I can wait for this airplane to go by.
I know, we're right under the flight path to Portland International. We're here at Husquiet, which translates to Good Rain Farm, a direct-to-consumer, community-supported agriculture vegetable farm.
We share this property with 11 other operating farms.
I rent an 1.5 acres of intense vegetable rotation and farming for our nearly 150 CSA membership. We service the Portland metro area, which when I say that Portland, Oregon is a huge Native population, those are Native community members from all across Turtle Island. And you know, we have an urban Native population because of relocation and the disbandment of many tribes who then had to fight again for recognition.
I myself, as an Arrow Lakes person, my tribe in particular was considered extinct until 2020.
And when we grow crops that aren't necessarily mine, right? I'm not Seminole, I'm not Muskogee, I'm not Hopi, I'm not Cherokee. But when I grow those crops from those communities and I'm serving an urban Native population, ultimately those crops make it back to some of those people from those tribes. So Husquiet Good Rain Farm kind of tries to focus on bringing foods back to those dinner plates and sharing those foods with those tribal members so they can reconnect.
This one.
Oh, do you know the weather this week?
I think it's supposed to be pretty
Sunny?
wet.
Darn it.
Let me see.
Yeah.
It's pretty wet.
All right, then.
Well, farm walk?
Okay. All right, field
Okay.
walk chores.
Yeah. And then other stuff.
Other stuff. At this point in the season, we are doing a lot of field walks to take in how our soil moisture content is and if it's ready to be tilled and worked.
So I try not to like walk in it. I walk on the edges so I don't compact the soil too much. I don't want to till the soil when it's too wet, so I do this test. It's just called like a handball test or a soil test. I kind of lightly squeeze it and then I'm going to bounce it.
Oh, that's wet.
And yeah, that's super wet. It rained last night, so this on Saturday would actually crumble about 3 or 4 bounces in. Right now, it stays firm. So this is high moisture. It's way too wet to be tilling or doing anything major to right now. So yeah, making do with the weather. But it is so wet over here. We're not gonna get in, are we? Yeah.
Not for a while.
Such a bummer. All right.
Climate change is hitting us hard. We are experiencing both extremely wet and cold winters and springs here in the Northwest that make it hard to get into the ground and grow things till it's almost too late for our season. And then we're having hotter, short, dry summers. But as we experience new different climates, we're able to pull techniques from community and test them out and see if they grow well here. And there's a lot we can learn from indigenous communities that have thrived in hotter, drier climates for centuries, millennia.
All right, so let's take a look at some of our Hopi blue corn underneath here.
So the Hopi blue corn is a really great corn to grow here in the Northwest. It does really well, dry farmed here. And dry farming, which is from our community's southwest, is the act of farming without mechanical irrigation methods. So no overhead, no drip irrigation, no plumbing really, which is both handy because I'm not the best plumber. And our clay soils tend to retain moisture for a really long time. So we'll plant crops like tomatoes or corn or beans through a wetter spring. We won't irrigate them, and then they're gonna grow deep roots deep down into the ground and become really efficient scavengers of water and nutrients. Because they're like used to scavenging and different soil types, this variety, it's much hardier and drought resistant than some of our genetically modified corns. Those corns need a lot more babying, a lot more pesticides, a lot more fertilizers, because they're not scavenging for that in the soil as well. They're not very good taking up water. You need a lot more water to make things sweet than to grow a dry item out. So a lot of our heritage crops that we grow, we're trading off a plant that has high yield and maybe tastes better to us to be more climate resilient and bioregionally adapted. So one of the ways that we build a more resilient food system is by protecting and saving bioregionally adaptive plants. And that could be any plant from across the world that has slowly been introduced to a new climate. And over time, the strong ones that have the genetic material to survive, say the Pacific Northwest, a wetter, shorter season, those seeds then go on to be saved and grown again and again, and they strengthen those muscles to this climate and stretch the roots out into this clay, wet soil better. So on our farm, we save seed in-house. So inside the curing shed here, I just turned off the fans. We always have fans going. It's a pretty dark cave-like space. It is fully insulated. We only have windows on the north side, not the south. The sun's coming up and shining in. We're blocking that out. So we store some of our seed. We do a lot of on-site farm seed saving as well. And that is to grow regionally adapted and microclimately adapted seed for our farm, especially indigenous seeds, which are considered rare, heirloom. From Hopi blue corn and Cherokee gourd seed corn and Seminole pumpkin and chamoya peppers and Seneca sunflowers. The list goes on and on. These foods were almost completely wiped out during colonization and settlement. We've really hindered the growth of a lot of our foods all around the world, and we're losing them. We're losing these ecosystems, we're losing these foods, and that's why it's so important that we do seed saving, both for just our own food resiliency, modern day, but also for our histories and the reclaiming of indigenous identities. Yeah, so now you just plant them and they'll grow. Yeah. Really pretty. Growing up here with my family, we always played in the dirt. And one year I had asked for raised garden beds. So before we knew about anything radical, we just tore up the front lawn and put in these raised beds and grew this food. And it wasn't till later when I was entering the agriculture industry and learning about these small-scale farming systems that I realized that I already knew this stuff. It was already in my bones, in my DNA, in my blood, this intuition that plants were people and that we should treat them with that reverence. So it was just natural for me. This bed doesn't look like much, but if you start training your eyes, you'll see them. This is Camas lily. And Camas lily is a Pacific Northwest native root crop. It takes about 3 to 7 years to truly establish. So it's a very long, slow growing plant, but a really important first food for the Northwest region. It loves our soil types, and it pretty much only grows in these cleared savanna spaces Spaces alongside Oregon white oaks and marshy wetlands. It used to be prolific, but they're extremely rare now, and not by choice. This land was stolen and developed and abused, and we lost this plant. We lost these foods and these ecosystems. Growing up, I wasn't particularly encouraged to talk about or share my Indigenous identity with anybody. I had lots of questions, but they were usually brushed off, and I think that that was a lot of generational trauma and hurt and concern for my safety and well-being. My grandmother had gone to boarding school, had lost contact with her specific tribal connection from the reservation. There's this famous quote from a colonel for why the boarding schools existed, and it was, kill the Indian, save the man. And our generation is the saved man, but killed Indian. To have grown up in a space like that, it was a protective space, but it was lonely too. And just, it felt like I was disconnected from something. To be reintroducing native plants and native crops and native foods to stolen land is a very steep emotional toll for me and a laborious toll. But I decided to do it for at least one bed, and they can bloom every spring and showcase my hopes and dreams and goals for Hosquiet for a good rain farm. This is our first harvest for the season. We saved it especially for you. You know, this purple, pink, red coloring in it, that's all those antioxidants. So the more colorful it is, the more antioxidants there are.
The red color is like the sunscreen too.
Oh, yeah.
It's just funny how that always seems to go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I love that. And then the dandelions, right, are growing in here, which you can actually eat. And that is like a big part of my Indigenous ancestry and utilizing what we had access to. So when we lost access to a lot of our native foods or pre-contact colonial foods, we were then eating a lot of these weeds. They're all part of an important ecosystem. So yeah, being those pioneer, those first plants to pop up in freshly tilled barren land and to populate it and hold that soil steady, and they proliferate with all their progeny and their roots and like hold that soil down in place. So they're actually so important, and then we like totally degrade them, and that's such a bummer. It's so unfortunate. So we're gonna harvest all of these nice little yellow delightful heads that we have everywhere. Why not eat them? All right.
Bring up to the truck?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Nice. I estimated 40 to 50.
We got 40?
We got 40. So we're gonna go take this down and wash and pack it to the truck. For me, the farm ebbs and flows in how big of an impact it feels it makes versus how small and singular I feel. I don't know. I struggle with that. And like the reality is I got stuff to do. I got a farm to grow. I got people to feed yesterday. Like I live here in capitalism. I gotta pay rent. I gotta pay my bills. Like, but you can do all of that with respect for your fellow human, with respect for the plants, and the respect for all these other living creatures on this planet, and it can just be part of your everyday. Food is for all people. It's a human right. And for me, food sovereignty really means that a community gets to make their own choices. So being able to continue to be like, hey, hi, I'm Sinai, I'm Arrow Lakes, I exist, I am here still today. I'm growing this food for these other community members who are still here today, despite all of this persecution. We are still going to continue to bring our wisdom and our knowledge with us to tackle these problems of climate chaos and make a thriving, more equitable future.